Let's take a look at all my WCW Mattel action figure collection here. All the sort of Legends releases kind of represent that time period, kind of later 90s WCW, when I was watching my collection mostly based probably on the WCW Revenge Nintendo 64 game more than anything. But I kind of stretched the time period a little bit here and there, and the roster choices as well. We'll go through all the figures. First, we'll just show all the titles. They've actually finally released pretty much every WCW championship. It was a long wait with this collection, but we got the WCW Tag Team Championships. There is an older version of the titles, but I like these versions. I like the light blue color, just that kind of ribbon design. These are great to put on many different WCW Tag Team Champions. And again, I always love the design, so kind of missing maybe some red from the real titles here and there, but just happy to have the real design. Got the WCW Television title. Looks pretty good on people like Booker T, probably the champ for a long time when I first started watching. Simple one, but one I always kind of liked the look of. The Cruiserweight Championship, the real WCW design, since for so long they kept giving the WWE version very different looking title. Probably one of the more interesting championships since there were so many different and exciting champions to watch. You could only see on WCW back then. So this is a key one to have represented in this collection. Definitely want more cruiserweights. The WCW version of the United States Championship with the little flag. It's actually kind of like the WWF Intercontinental title. The big eagle glued on the front. This belt's a little big too. It's almost the size of the world title. I think the real one was a little smaller in size. But I was happy to see it got made in the Mattel collection. And so the WCW World title, which is definitely just kind of like the WWE version. I mean, we even have the logo up here. So not exactly the same, but pretty close in the shape and design. And of course, the kind of NWO graffitied version. You know, when an NWO guy would win the belt, typically they'd spray paint the title. So you can kind of have these on different champions, you know, your WCW champion and your NWO champion in a way. And then that was a cool thing in the video game that if you did win it with like Hulk Hogan, the belt would get the spray paint on it. So I would say the crown jewel of this little collection is going to be the Sting figure with this kind of NWO busting crow look. I remember when this came out, the prospect that they were going to finally do a bunch of Sting figures, and I was like, I can probably skip this one because I kind of wanted the kind of long, tight singlet look he had. That was more common in the game and things like that, but unfortunately he kind of left pretty soon. They didn't make very many Sting figures, so I'm glad I got this one. I think it's defining moments. And he kind of has a little bit different gear, like an earlier match with this look. This kind of vest has like the padded bits in the shoulder, but it came with his big trench coat and of course the bat. The face paint looking awesome, so pretty much makes or breaks my WCW collection having Sting like this, because he was like the face that was never really like jumping from one to the other, like you could only see him on WCW. So very lucky I got this when it came out new way back when, because I was kind of thinking they were going to be a lot more Sting figures, and they actually didn't make too many. I like this one. That's the full Elite body and pretty close to the look I was wanting, but wouldn't mind getting that someday closer to the attire in the WCW Revenge video game. But he's got pretty much everything he needs. Trench coat, bat, give him the world title or tag title with some of his different partners. Pretty much the centerpiece of this collection in my opinion. Probably second to Hollywood Hulk Hogan. This is actually an ultimate one, so even beyond Elite. Got the NWO version of Hogan. Of course, he had all sorts of accessories and stuff. I have a video of its very own showing off this figure and everything it came with. And that'll be true for a lot of these. They just have individual videos where I focus on them a lot more, show like a lot of poses and articulation points of them, and a lot of different points on them. So I won't spend too much time on them, but some of these big stars here in this video I want to showcase a little bit. But what I like about my collection is probably the smaller characters, but you gotta have the big ones too to have, like, you know, the umbrella, you know, you got the big stars at the top going down to all the other talent you'd see on the show. Brother. When Mattel first started making the wrestling figures and they were going to have their Legends line, pretty excited because we didn't get too many Diamond Dallas Page figures. Here we have a pretty nice one with kind of his more ring gear with the design and everything, not the usual jeans you might see in the video games of the time and stuff, but he had all his tattoos and everything. Just kind of an older style face before the facial printing, so he's a little cartoony. So I wouldn't be against getting a newer one, but I do kind of like this attire. I think it was in the games to some degree, although I think he had his kind of sleeveless shirt instead of just the vest in the game. But another early one that really started to build my WCW collection. I feel like it has a lot going on that still makes it pretty awesome. Blue on the inside of the vest, and I love all the logos with the diamond. But this was before the alternate hand, so you can't do the old diamond cutter swap out with them. Older elites, if you do want to like switch hands at some point, you need to warm them up, take it out, because they weren't really intended back then. You could break the tabs in the hands. Just a little tip there as we go. But there's Diamond, Dallas Page. Bang! Had an elite of the Giant. But I did get kind of the later 2-pack. There was like a Ric Flair and Giant 2-pack. Actually had facial printing, a little bit better head than the little cartoonier one that came with this body. So I've done a bit of a swap, but it was probably one of the first I'd done, so he's a little not too well put together, so I wouldn't say no to, you know, like an Ultimate Edition The Giant from WCW. Because this is a little hobbled together in a way. But the original one was a super cartoony look, but it almost did look like the video game appearance before. But this one's a little more realistic looking. But then his classic kind of giant singlet you'd see. So really made his name in WCW before turning into The Big Show in the WWF later. I only started watching wrestling because I played the WCW World Tour video game. And it was pretty easy for me to understand the Giant was the biggest dude, so I would play as him at first. So maybe one of my first favorite wrestlers in a way. Kind of cool seeing him in the game and then seeing him in live action on TV later. Another early one that really made the collection, the NWO version of the Macho Man, Randy Savage. Ooh, the madness. Which even in the NWO, but this like look kind of made him his own thing. Like it was his own character and gimmick, not just NWO based. But again, an early one, you can remove the headband shades, although really Macho Man, super iconic with all that accessories on and stuff. But just to take a look at the face, again, a lot of these are earlier elites when they were doing WCW stuff and then kind of very slowly trickled more in. So I think we'll get a little more action going soon. That's why I want to do this, show my collection so far, show some past ones that they might need to redo, although some of these they have, because I think he has an Ultimate Edition now in this kind of attire. NWO logo, again, this is like a plastic shirt instead of cloth, and just plasticky tassels. But another major one to add. Ooh, yeah! Please give me back my accessories. Goldberg, which I have kind of the yelling head on there just for something different looking. I believe he came with just a more normal one there, but the classic original kind of attire in WCW, just the black tights, nothing special. Just had the tattoo that sort of stood out. Another guy pretty much big name in WCW and then just a little bit of a run in the WWE. But kind of a later one, like later 90s. But he was in that Nintendo 64 video game. I think they just got him in, possibly, too. Very lucky because they didn't get to do a second game with WCW's license. But I have a whole video about the 2-pack this one happened to come from, but there's other releases like this. He came with the Bret Hart, so this is kind of WCW Bret Hart with the rounded shades. And it's just cool to get an actual exact WCW attire with this kind of tone of pink and everything, just to make it precise with the WCW theme. But again, I have a whole video. You want to check out the channel below. Click my little icon. You can see all the videos of the individual figures. So I go over the 2-pack pretty thoroughly in its own video. And the unique accessories they came with. Got the Elite Scott Hall with a pretty big head. Again, I have my theories on Mattel kind of like ballooning the heads for a while, then realizing they made them too big for too long. Then they shrink them back down, and then they just slowly balloon up over time. I think it's harder when they don't really do super proper scans of some of the legends. They just kind of like, oh, he looks pretty unique. We can just craft the head. But maybe it's just because the older ones like this one, they just ended up more cartoony just because of the technology of the time. But I always like the red look for him. Outsiders, and then the blood drip. Even kind of before the real Wolfpack NWO, he was in the red, just on his own. This is kind of the tag team with Kevin Nash was almost the first Wolf Pack before it became like a stable, full version. But even in the earlier ones, they look pretty good for the time. It gets a little rough once you start adding in facial printing figures amongst them, and you kind of go, this stands out a little bit. Hey. We even have detailed chest hair action. You can almost feel it. And Kevin Nash, of course, in his red Outsiders kind of tag team attire. Another kind of cartoonier look. Even the hair is a little weird. It's all off to the side. Makes the articulation a little stranger with that. But one of his attires from the Nintendo 64 game, so another fairly early Elite, and they started doing the flashbacks instead of the dedicated Legends line. Just kind of mix in a few Legends into the current wrestler releases. He's got some big long legs, so he's sized pretty good. Just a little bit of a simpler face, but I feel like it still has the likenesses behind these. But the hair color is a little light, seems like. Like a very specific WCW looking Ric Flair, but this is where a little newer one, facial printing, but the very WCW-ish haircut of the time there. 4 Horsemen hands. No robe or anything, he just had like a 4 Horsemen shirt, but I kind of think I have his own video about this figure if you want to see more about it. Plenty of figures of some of these people, but getting the specific WCW version is great for this collection. Makes it a lot more authentic and matching that way. But I never figured out who RJ was. Oh well, I can't read. You gotta put the knee pads down too. This is a very important point if you get a Ric Flair figure. Put the knee pads down so that when you hit him with that knee drop, woo! Gets the job done. Got a super awesome WCW Booker T, one of my favorites of the time. Putting on awesome matches back then. Long matches too. In like the Harlem Heat kind of pants there. Again, an earlier head, but I feel like the likeness is there. They had a Stevie Ray released with this one, but I never got it because I just thought they maybe would do like an NWO Stevie Ray. And unfortunately, that was the only Stevie Ray figure they did, so I never got it. So I'm like missing Stevie Ray. That would be pretty nice for this WCW collection. But really, I just wanted Booker T for this singles run more than the tag team. Always like television champion, US champion. Probably one of the first guys when I was watching wrestling early on, just thinking like, why isn't he going for the world title? He has like won quite a bit when I was watching and looked big, like he could really contend with the others, so probably the first one that I thought, like, before I knew you could kind of ascend to that level, you know, eventually. Took some time, but Booker T got up there. Pretty much solid early on that one. He looked good with the world title, even in the WCW video game, too. Even in this attire, that he'd kind of lose eventually, but I love these, like, flames and stuff, so I like this look for my WCW collection, even though he did kind of, like, do the short tights and kind of look more serious in a way later on in the run, but again, since I like the Nintendo 64 game time period, this is the kind of attire he had in that game, too. Another super key one to have. Hitting a Harlem sidekick. And Ultimate Warrior from his one and only match in WCW. I have a whole video about this one. You want to see his awesome entrance jacket and stuff, but kind of a cool way to sneak in the Ultimate Warrior since he doesn't fit into the Attitude Era that I also collect for WWF. Sneaking the Warrior into my WCW collection. He was totally there. It's legit. Here's an interesting one, just kind of a Psycho Sid figure that I've kind of made to be Sid Vicious for WCW. Added his jeans here. I think this is an old Ralph's clothing thing that I had on a Stone Cold. It was like Stone Cold in his vest and jeans, but I think there's a figure with just like the jeans molded on, so I got the idea like, ooh, I could get Sid, put the jeans on him and kind of look like his WCW Sid Vicious run. Got like an elbow pad on him there. A little bit of a younger head and stuff, but still very much Sid looking. Looks like he's having difficulties. You have to be careful with this figure's leg. It tends to have issues sometimes. This is kind of like his attire for when his leg... Anyway, it's pretty good for a WCW collection to have Sid kind of in this attire. He looks pretty awesome. I was always highly entertained by Sid in WCW in different ways. Who doesn't love to see a big old powerbomb get hit anyway? So a little bit unique piece there. Got some custom in there. So I like it. What do you think of it? Absolutely vicious. Man. Got Kurt Hennig like a Legends Elite figure, but I've kind of wanted to bolster my NWO roster, so we kind of got the NWO little shirt on there. I have quite a few NWO shirts from different figures. We could probably put different stuff on him, like maybe get a cloth one now. But I like to see that blue singlet underneath. That was his color in the WCW Revenge game. It's good to kind of mark him with NWO just to clarify, like, you know, this is Henning after he joined the NWO. Still got the old towel. Do the perfect towel throw. Another earlier one, but again, the likeness there, I just feel like, glance at that, that's definitely Curt Hennig. No facial printed needed. Ugh. Lex Luger, which we got the black tights and white boots that I had to kind of work to get, because I had like a chase kind of figure situation where it was like an older Lex in WCW with like colored tights. I think it had the white boots. Then they had like a Wolfpack Lex that had the black tights, so I kind of had to mix and match. This is like the little more modern head with the hair kind of pulled back in the ponytail. So kind of his classic face look, kind of like winning the WC title off of Hollywood Hogan, and just another guy a little more unique to WCW, even though he did have his WWF runs. But with this look, you know, the simpler look, and then just always remember the white boots instead of just having black boots too. So I do have like the younger head, a little more of a mullet there, but this is kind of the newer one, kind of later 90s, what I'm trying to do with my collection. But pretty big main eventer there to add. A little bit of a swap job there to get the one I wanted, but it was worth it, because anything that's really like that Nintendo 64 game, that's what I'm looking for with my figure collection. It's Lex Luger. Fairly recent one, a Rick Steiner, kind of later 90s. Probably would have liked more of the tag team with Rick and Scott, but then this way, if we get an NWO Scott Steiner, then I'll have kind of the two opposite ends of the spectrum, the WCW Rick Steiner. Had this jacket for a while, I think while he was face, and then eventually kind of turned heel even. But I have a whole video if you want to see up close details of this one. It has quite a few details. Tights, boots, jacket, and everything. Woof, and such. Ooh, finally, a little bit of the cruiserweight action. Dean Malenko, the man of 1,000 holds. So a unique one. Here's one that came with like the WWE cruiserweight title, even though this is clearly like a WCW appearance for him. But they eventually released the WCW version, so get a little cruiserweight division going there. Missing a lot of unique ones like the luchadors, but kind of get what we can get. We got Dean Malenko here. Probably would have liked like just a blue or blue and yellow attire, but they got like a pink one here. And that's pretty much all they've released, so you gotta take what you can get. Otherwise, I don't have Dean Malenko in my collection. So again, for no facial printing or anything, they did pretty sweet on the likeness for him too. So the Iceman, Dean Malenko. Grr. And a Rey Mysterio Jr., of course. I actually have a couple figures. This one's just kind of a newer one that I kind of like. Just the way his mask and stuff is. The older style Rey Mysterio mask. Smaller body, so it looks pretty cool with the sizing that he is smaller. Any mask figure makes your collection looks pretty awesome. Just some variety in there, you know, especially the colors too. But with Rey, since he had so many attires and different masks, kind of have to have a couple multiple figures of him. But I have other videos about Rey Mysterio figures if you want to see those later. I definitely like getting WCW specific attires like this. Ooh. And we have a little bit of a WCW-ish Eddie Guerrero here. We got the LWO shirt that started in WCW. The Latino World Order. But the figure was originally like a WWF kind of Latino Heat figure, but he did kind of have these designs in WCW. This one's just a black and gold only. Typically he was in like some red and such coloring for WCW, but kind of mixed and matched and made this one for a pretty decent look, especially the LWO shirt helps because that's very specific to WCW at the time. But he looks pretty good without it too, just in these tights. And the old classic hair there, too. Ho-ho. Where's Chavo? I need Chavo. Chavo Guerrero Jr.? Oh, I snuck in a non-Mattel here. We got Ultimo Dragon, one of the unique cruiserweights they got in at the time from Japan. He was always wrestling in Mexico, too, so they just kind of got him through that, I imagine, too. This is like a Boss Fight Studios figure, but it's kind of the same scale for Mattel, and then I've always liked Ultimo Dragon quite a bit. Probably the second character I discovered on those early video games playing as. And then getting to see him on TV for real was like just kind of cool. I've always liked Ultimo Dragon, and I feel like this kind of fits in since I don't think Mattel's going to be getting a hold of him to do any official Mattel figures. I don't always mix in other brands, but especially a wrestler I really want to add to this Cruiserweight Championship champion at the time and television champion and everything. Pretty sweet Ultimo Dragon. I have a whole video about him too you can check out, just see where he comes from and everything like that. My secret favorite in the collection, Ultimo Dragon. Okay, we got some weird ones here. We got like Rick Rude that did kind of come out. He did the famous, he was on Raw, WWF, and Nitro, WCW in the same week. So he jumped over to WCW. So he kind of had this look here, shaved up, had the mustache. Just kind of bolstering the collection with extra people that appeared there. And then Rick Rude was in WCW early on, but I'm mostly collecting from the later 90s there. Give him a WCW microphone there. Just kind of put the head on a basic suited body. This is probably like a JBL body or something like that I got a hold of. Rick Rude kind of with the NWO too, so it kind of helps that. And he was a manager in the WCW Revenge game too. So kind of a good addition there with that. A little bit of a Bobby the Brain Heenan. I kind of did a little body swap there, try to make him look a little like maybe something he would dress up as with the commentary team on WCW. Just a way to get him included into my later 90s collection. That's where he was, is in WCW as an announcer. The Brain. I have a whole video about putting this together if you want to see. Also on the announced team, Larry Sabisco. They kind of did this early Elite here, because he has a pretty simple look there. But then he was in that Nintendo 64 game too. Like, he did have some late matches in there. Nothing I probably really saw, because it would just been on pay-per-view. Never really afford that. But he was in the game, so just interesting fact that they actually did make a figure of Larry Sabisco. So sneaking in an old legend that way, fitting the theme of my WCW collection too. The living legend. Put together a little Dusty Rhodes kind of custom here, just swapping some parts mostly. But he was a manager in that Nintendo 64 game with like the red jacket here, like NWO with Scott Hall. So I wanted to kind of sneak that in kind of in a way too. It's not like an official release or anything. Got a nice cloth NWO shirt. I thought it was pretty cool. But I was the only one. NWO Dusty, who would have thought? Got like a Bam Bam Bigelow in the gray, kind of later WCW. This is where I'm kind of stretching my time period here. He was not in the Nintendo 64 game because he was probably still in ECW or something before he really made the jump to WCW. But a newer one, so a really awesome face on him. But I have an whole unboxing video of him if you want to see a lot more of Bam Bam. And another later one, Terry Funk, wrestling in his striped tights there, later WCW. We're starting to get in some hardcore action. Very late WCW Hardcore Championship. Oh, we got the Funker here. He has a whole video we can check out. And his WWF equivalent, Chainsaw Charlie, you can see too. But I could also put this one in kind of my ECW little collection, but that one's pretty small, not too many figures. So we're putting him on the WCW side here. Got kind of a custom put together for Vincent. Again, a manager in the Nintendo 64 Revenge game. Just take like a Virgil head and kind of got his own body with some jeans and an NWO shirt. Really should have an official release, so I would still get it if they did, but really want to have more NWO members, so kind of thought, hey, they've made a Virgil figure, I could make a Vincent figure too. Hey. I have a Lord Steven Regal, which you could probably take this off. He's got that maroon tights and stuff. He could be a WWF Attitude Era appearance if you wanted, but this jacket he's kind of using in WCW, so pretty nice to help out the WCW collection that way. I believe he was in the World Tour game a little bit before Revenge. I still go by a little bit. A nice one to have, sneaking William Regal, going by Steven Regal back then though. No facial printing, but you can really see the scowl there. Pretty clear on the appearance. Holy smokes, I even got a little flag for my Hacksaw Jim Duggan. This is definitely a younger looking one. This is meant to be like, you know, 80s or early 90s Jim Duggan. But he had a pretty sweet little run that I remember watching on WCW. He was beating people with the Old Glory knee drop. So I definitely remember him from that, since I just started watching wrestling then, in the later 90s. I wanted to include him in my WCW collection that way. And he looks pretty cool with the flag. And the 2x4, of course, as well. So hopefully I'll get to add a lot more WCW figures here. And get subscribed to see what else I add to this awesome collection. My time period's a little loose, so you can throw out suggestions or whatever you'd like of maybe wrestlers I've missed or that would fall under the WCW banner. Let me know what you think of this little collection here. I've got too many recommendations in my brain, so see roster list of this game, and I just want everybody in that game pretty much. So, I mean, right here on the cover we're missing somebody right off the bat there. That gives you any clues. So plenty more later 90s Mattel action figures shown here. If you made it to this point, you probably want to get subscribed for sure, that we can see any other future additions I add to the WCW side or even the Attitude Era of WWF as well. Hoping to see you in the next video that way.